Right, part 2, chapter 4. This is a big chapter. I don't know how many pages of notes I've got. A few. We'll see how we get on. So, Stolz and Oblomov are together in Oblomov's room, and then Stolz manages to get him out of the house. So it's like, whoa, well done. Bravo, Stolz. He's obviously a good influence. Remember that they grew up together and their friendship goes deep. And a lot of that gets revealed in this chapter, and I just love it. It's just... So, Stolz gets him out on a whirlwind of visits to different places, and it's all compressed into a couple of paragraphs. And then the chapter really takes off when we get into how that makes Ilya Ilyich feel. So he talks of the vacuousness of some of these society people that they go and visit. It's all small talk and backbiting and, or is it backstabbing? Anyone who's not in the room gets talked about, and then obviously you worry that when you're not in the room you're going to get talked about, and it's just meaningless drivel. And he says, what has happened to human beings, to integrity? True values seem to have disappeared and been traded in for triviality of every kind. Now, yesterday I was doom scrolling on Instagram, as sometimes I find myself doing against my will. That algorithm, you know what I mean? But there is some good stuff on there, particularly about neurodiversity, and I saw a clip about oversharing, and it's something I'm certainly guilty of myself. If you've ever been on my other Substack where I share my journal pages, you might kind of get that impression. And in this clip, the woman spoke about why she overshares and how for her small talk is draining. It takes energy for her to focus on small talk because she just doesn't care. So it's absolutely draining. But on the other hand, getting into deep and meaningful conversations lights her up. It's like a hyper-focus thing. So I just put that out there because it's in my head. Just saw it yesterday, and then we get this. And as you might know, I have a feeling that there's some ADD or ADHD without the hyperactivity in Oblomov. So I'll put a link to that reel in the description, you can go and watch it. So yeah, he has a rant then, and he says, people, society, it's as if you are deliberately making me go out and socialise in order to kill any possible inclination I may have had to do so. They are your living dead. They are the ones who spend their whole lives asleep on chairs. So he's talking about all these society people that they've been visiting. It's like, yeah, I get that. And then my mind, right now as I'm talking, takes me back to a scene in a book I finished last month, which I have reviewed in my monthly wrap-up, called The Disaffection by James Kelman, where there's a scene, a society scene. That's set in Glasgow, and the main character, Patrick, who's a disaffected 29-year-old teacher in Glasgow, goes round to his brother's house, and his brother's got friends round, and they have an afternoon drinking session. And some of the discussions that come up, they are not small talk discussions, they're quite deep and meaningful. So that just came into my head. Sorry about that wee diversion. So, got to flip, because I've been doing lots of reading. Brothers Karamazov yesterday. Oh, wait till you hear about that, if you're following along with that. The Grand Inquisitor. Right, so Oblomov says, it's like some kind of contagion. They all affect one another with this restless, tormented anxiety, as if they were all feverishly hunting for something. It wouldn't be so bad if it meant they were seeking truth, or their own good, or the good of their fellow men. But no, They shudder at the very thought of the good fortune of their friends. So they're all very egotistical, out for themselves, and out to downplay everybody else to their own advantage. So yeah, it's not an attractive society, is it? Everyone has to have an opinion about everything. They argue left, right and centre, but underneath they're bored stiff by it all and couldn't care less. Underneath this uproar, they're all fast asleep. None of this concerns them in the least. They're just masquerading. Their interest in everything simply disguises their interest in nothing. It's just a way of filling the void. The void, the vacuum, the vacuousness. That's the word that comes to my mind to describe these people. Just choosing some modest goal that requires some effort and moving steadily towards it, that doesn't appeal to them at all. It has no glamour. It doesn't make any impression. That way, all this information they've picked up would be wasted and wouldn't impress anyone. So he's talking here about how they're discussing the news of the day and how shocked they are when they learn that Ilya Ilyich doesn't read the papers. Imagine that. And it's very like today, isn't it? Politics gets discussed all over the place. What job you do is one of the first questions people ask. So what do you do? I hate that question. Hate it. In fact, I had to fill in a form last week when I went out for an appointment at the osteopath. And on the form, it asked occupation. I was like, what's that got to do with my sore shoulder? So I put writer. It felt good, actually. I remember once telling the dentist that I was a musician. And I am both of those things. Just because it doesn't make me any money doesn't mean I'm not those things. I'm not defined by my job, but that's the first question, or maybe the second question after your name. Or the third question, name, where are you from, what do you do? It's just how society is, and it does man nothing. Imagine being defined by your job, you know, and these people are defining themselves or giving opinions. It says there everyone has to have an opinion about everything. It's like, that's how life is now. It's kind of pish, actually. Stolz has Ilya list his values. Right, this is a great scene. Remember, they're good friends, and so Stolz is like, so what are you all about? What would you do if money were no object? And we get a good couple of pages of Oblomov talking about how he envisages a happy life. Wife, children, home in the country. Going for walks with his wife, having nice dinners with his wife and his friends, living an idyllic, lazy kind of life. And I suppose the meaning would come through love for his family. And I have to say, it sounds like an attractive life. It's a life I could imagine. In fact, it's kind of a life I've got in some ways. Get to sit out here with my books, talk to you about books, write notes with my fountain pens, wife and kids. It's pretty good, I have to say. So yeah, he asks him, what would you do if money were no object? Because Ilya Ilyich has 300 serfs, and he seems to think that's not enough to live this life that he has in his imagination. Stolz disabuses him of that notion, says, aye, that's plenty. But he says, no, it's not enough. So Stolz asks him what he would do if it weren't 300, but 300,000 serfs that he had. And he said, I'd mortgage the lot and live off the interest. It's like, what? You wouldn't invest it? He says, no. I certainly wouldn't do that. So yeah, his dream is to be in a new, comfortably appointed house, surrounded by nice neighbours, and not to have to go anywhere. You're a real poet, Ilya, Stolz broke in. Yes, a poet of life, for life is poetry, though, of course, you can't stop people distorting it. So, yeah, after we get a description of his ideal life, it got me wondering what happened to him. Why is he the way he is? We go into a bit of that, which is really interesting. So he's saying all conversation would be from the heart. This is in his ideal life. There'd be no need ever to move out of your apartment, and what a boon that alone would be. And that's not life? Absolutely not, Stolz persisted. Well then, what is it according to you if it's not life? It's... Stolz paused, trying to find the right word to describe that version of life. It's a kind of Oblomovshchina, he said, finally. Now this is an important bit of the book, and it gets into a bit of translation discussion. In the Magarshak translation, I think he has it as Oblomovitis. I've also seen it as Oblomovism. I've thought about it long and hard. What would I call it? Is it Oblomovism or is it Oblomovitis? Because I would have to use either one or the other when I was doing these videos. And I wasn't sure because Oblomovism made me think of a political ideology, an ism, Marxism, Leninism, or alcoholism, which is not a political ideology, it's a condition. So in that sense, Oblomovism would fit, but I wasn't sure. Oblomovitis, on the other hand, sounds like a disease, an illness. And I don't think what he suffers from is an illness. I think what he suffers from is a condition. Or would you say that ADHD is an illness? A mental illness, perhaps? Or is it a condition? Or is it a disorder? Semantics, dear friends. But what's interesting is that Stephen Pearl has avoided the issue completely. And he's going with the Russian transliterated into English, Oblomovshchina. And I thought, bravo, I would never have thought of that. But it makes perfect sense. It avoids these issues I've talked about. And since Oblomovism or Oblomovitis both use the word Oblomov, and we have to figure out what this unusual word means. Oblomovshchina also incorporates the word Oblomov and makes it a Russian word, which fits the context of the novel, fits the fact that either of these three words are new to us as English readers, so if we're going to pick one, it really doesn't matter if we pick a transliteration, because we don't know any of the three words and we have to kind of figure out what it means from the context. And we know from the context what it means. So, yeah. There's more in Stephen Pearl's discussion at the end of the book where he talks about his translation, some of the choices he's made and stuff like that. So, if you've got the Pearl translation, take a look at that. But I will talk about it at length in a later video, something I'd like to do. So, Oblomovshchina. It's just great. So we learn that Ilya wasn't always against the idea of hard work, which Stolz reminds him of some of the things that he said when he was a younger man. This is super interesting because we're like, well, he used to believe in hard work. And here's a couple of things that he said. To work as long as you have strength, because Russia needs hands and heads to develop and explore its inexhaustible reserves, so that your life outside your work can be richer. Richer in the sense of living in a different kind of life, a life of art, of aesthetic satisfaction, the life of the artist, the poet. So this is Oblomov speaking, young Oblomov. And then Stolz says to him, you were going to visit other lands so as to understand and love your own better. And he just said previously, Oblomov, that his dream would be to live in a comfortable apartment and never go anywhere. But at one time he did want to travel. He did want to work hard to better himself and for his country as well. So what happened? Andrei has his purpose. He says, work, both the idea and the substance, is the very point and essence of life, at least for me. And then we get a big phrase in the book. He says to Oblomov, it's now or never. So, yeah, we've got a little bit of background about Oblomov and how he was not always the way that he was. So what happened? Oblomov says to him, Andrei, I really need your help. I just don't have the will or the strength of character to do anything about it. If you lead, I might be able to follow, but left to myself, I'm rooted to the spot. You're absolutely right. It's now or never. One more year and it will be too late. And then he talks of other people's lives, how their lives are, and he uses the metaphor of the day. As the day goes from morning into afternoon, it gets busy and colourful and energetic. And then as the day gets towards twilight, the colour starts to drain out of the day and you're left with the satisfied feeling of a job well done and having earned your living for so many years, you now have the right, perhaps, and the luxury of being able to slow down and enjoy more leisure time. And then he goes on to say, but my life seems to have begun at twilight. Strange as it may seem, as far back as I can remember, I've always had this feeling that I was on the wane, somehow fading. And it seemed to start to happen, he said, when he was working at his copying job. So he would be not long out of school in his first position and having to listen to the vacuous banter in the office, having to watch the one-upmanship of fur coats and badger collars and the backstabbing and stuff that we discussed earlier, the career-driven egotism, which for him is all meaningless. So I think it's when he got into his working life that he started to become disillusioned with what he was seeing. The mundanity of life, a life devoid of meaning. And he ends up retreating into himself. And then Stolz would come by and help him out, take him places and reignite the spark. But then Stolz would go away again and he'd be left to his own devices. And he says, yes, I'm like a shabby, threadbare coat, worn out not because of exposure to the elements or hard work, but because for 12 years a light has been burning inside me, unable to find an outlet and doing nothing but illuminating the walls of its own prison, and, finding no opening to the outside world, has just been snuffed out for lack of oxygen. So, in a discussion to one of my previous videos, one of my readers / viewers pointed out this passage, and it got me thinking about my own life when he did. And the idea was that, for me, I think there are always embers. I mean, low mood hits me and then I don't feel like making anything, but if I can sit out here with a fountain pen and write some journal pages, that creative act blows oxygen onto the embers and they can reignite, and before I know where I am, I'm feeling ready to do this kind of thing and read closely with my notebook and my pens and understand the literature that I'm reading and then share it with you. The embers are always there, but he's saying here that they've been snuffed out And what happens when they're snuffed out completely? How do you reignite the embers? I mean, this is all metaphorical, of course. There's no embers inside me. That would be quite painful. But yeah, I suppose if we're speaking in metaphors, there's no reason why you couldn't find a spark to reignite them. So maybe the metaphor holds up, and if my embers have gone out through lack of oxygen, as Ilyich is saying, there is a possible spark that could reignite them. That's what I'm saying. So, will Ilya Ilyich find a spark? At the end of the chapter, Stolz is saying, right, we're going to go away together. Let's get you a passport, we'll go travelling. And then Ilya Ilyich is like, yeah, but what about Zachar? What about the estate? What about the apartment? What about? So we'll see whether he goes. What do you think? Do you think he's going to go? See you in the next one.